Welcome to Vysions Youth Service. Join us in our journey of exploring the River Trent.
Okay, here we are at the Wolseley Centre in Rugeley with Nicola, the Community Engagement Officer from Transforming the Trent Valley.
So I think what we might do then is actually we could go for a little walk around Temple Lake, around this bit, because that is quite shaded, which will be nice in this heat as well. So we can have a little walk through the woodland, which is called Badger Wood, and then around the back of Temple Lake as well. And there's usually a few different things that we can see there, so a few different birds and plants. So then we'll cut back round there and then go back round by the river, and there's some beautiful spots over at that bit as well. Yeah.
Okay, we're on the dragonflies. Yeah.
And you can look at this frogs as well.
It'll be further people too. Actually, look, there's a dragonfly. There's one right there. Isn't it beautiful? So we're standing on one of the pond dipping platforms, and lots of school groups come and use it for sessions when they come in school time. And there's loads living in these areas, just because we've got these reeds. And actually, if we look down, we can see some of the creatures just on the surface of the water. Can you see those down there? Kind of pond skaters, and they just scoot around on the surface. And we saw that big dragonfly a second ago. Oh, and there it is again. That's what, 3 inches long, and I think it's got kind of golden, kind of orangey golden wings as well, which I think means that it's a common hawker. I think that's an identifying feature of dragonflies. So the brown body and the kind of the brownish wings means it's a common hawker.
My name's Siobhan Pollard. I work here at the Wolseley Centre. It's a nature reserve tucked away on the bank of the River Trent, and there's 26 acres. It used to be a ground where there was a big hall on, so that got damaged by fire and demolished, and then the land was taken over by the Wildlife Trust in, I think it was 2003. When I first started here, we had a very small amount of people walking the site. As the footfall increased, it became more of a family space, somewhere that families can enjoy and come and learn about wildlife. It's just quite peaceful and quite a nice experience to just get away from the busyness, with the town also being quite nearby. My family are a mining family. My grandparents moved down from Northumberland. My granddad, my uncles and my dad came to work in the pit, and that was quite a big industry where I lived. So I lived on the Peartree estate, which was largely built for the mining families. My dad drove the locomotive, so he didn't necessarily go deep underground. But my granddad and my uncles, they found it quite a struggle, but they also found it a struggle when the mines closed, because then they didn't have their income. They were forced to struggle for a little bit until they got another job. I wasn't allowed to go near the river when I was younger because I'm not a very strong swimmer. The real thing that I remember about the river is they used to hold, on Bank Holiday August, they used to hold a raft race. They used to come from the garden centre car park right down to the car park on the bypass. So that was quite fun to watch because there were quite a few people falling off. Oh yeah, they were all homemade. I think that's what made it funny, but there were quite a few people that lost their glasses whilst they didn't take them off whilst they were on there, but yeah.
this river is like flowing, but the other lake was like mostly just still. But it's like flowing quite steadily.
This river seems to have a lot more rocks and looks a lot clearer. It's also a lot more open on one side than it is on the other.
Just like the plants that grow in the, you know, like spiky weed.
Oak trees, sycamore trees.
And loads of nettles.
Nettles.
I was an instrument mechanic for 20 odd years and then an engineer. It was the sort of thing I'd always wanted to do and carried on until the station shut, basically. The reason for the station being next to the river is you want water to cool a number of the systems on the site, because a lot of heat is generated from the rotation of the turbine and other things as well. And so you get pumped through the system and a heat exchange to remove that heat before it went up the cooling towers. And the vapour going out the top is the evaporation of that warm water into the air, so that the water that's left is cooler, with the water evaporating on off.
The steam that's coming out the top of the massive cooling towers is water from the Trent.
Yes. You know, the work could be fantastic. You know, you've got a lot of satisfaction at times from it, but it was most definitely the people, because it was the sort of place where people came and they didn't. You know, it wasn't often that people only stayed there for 1 or 2 years. Like me, you know, a lot of people went there expecting it to be a job for life, which it probably sort of was in the early 80s, and not so much later on, because obviously they were closing down. But B Station had something like 500 people at it when I first started there, and maybe 400 or so at A Station. I believe the peak was about 1,100 people across the whole site that were directly employed by the power station. But yeah, definitely the people, because they were people that you worked with for maybe 20, 30 or even 40 years. And so they're, you know, to a degree they are like extended family. Thank you. So we had peregrine falcons bred on the site, and probably for the last, I don't know, 10 or 15 years we had nest boxes on the power station where they bred. They'd disappear in the winter, but in sort of like February time the pair would reappear and you'd hear them calling and sort of like pair bonding again. They fledged lots of birds there over the years. The other thing that you could get on power station sites like that, because you've got the big tall buildings, you used to get a bird known as a black redstart. Very scarce in the UK. So I remember watching a male singing once. I could hear it from the ground. It was on the 138 foot level, which was where the top of the coal bunkers were. So I went up to the top of the roof of the power station and looked over the edge down, and I could see this male singing. So you got all that sort of thing. And otters obviously went along the Trent.
The other side of the river to where we are, there's a steep exposed bank, and there's a clue as to where the kingfisher nest is, and Katie's just trying to figure it out.
Is it the white dot?
Yep, the big white splodge over there. So what do you think the white splodge is?
Poo.
Yeah, it's bird poo, yeah. So what they tend to do is they tend to fly just above the surface of the water. So that's the place to look, is not high up in the sky, but quite close to the river, quite close to the surface of the water.
Yeah, I'm Nicola. Born in Stafford, moved to Rugeley when I was 5.5 years old. My family have been here for about 7, 8 generations. Great-great-great-grandfather and great-great-grandfather were the local stonemasons in Rugeley. First connection with the river would probably be around 72-3. My father, who worked at Universal Grinding Wheels in Stafford, they had a pool at Weston, and he asked his friend who was nearly retired then, would I like to go? And I just loved it. Not just the fishing, but the nature, the dawn, the dusk, everything about nature. Tried the river in Rugeley, probably early to mid-70s, and because it was always polluted, very little fish, and all you would catch would be like sticklebacks, minnows and gudgeon, which are bottom feeding fish. And then a few years later we started getting chub and roach in the river and dace, and it sort of moved on from there. Obviously the quality of the water was a lot better, and then we started getting bream and predators pike and things like that, and it's getting better and better. Obviously we follow the Trent and Mersey Canal, which is sort of running parallel here, and you've got the aqueduct, and so there was always something going on. I remember probably 15, 16, going along the river and by the canal, heading towards the Wolseley Bridge, and finding a nest of stoats. And being that age and recently losing a hamster, I thought, I'll take one of those home. And when my mother saw it, she went absolutely ballistic. And I said, what shall I do? And she said, you'll take it back where you found it. And how on earth do you find a family of stoats in the wild? But I went down and came across them straight away, and the mother accepted it, and off they went. I think the river benefited from the power stations. Obviously taking the cool water out and pumping hot water in was a better environment for the fish species and what have you. Because where the power station is, I used to fish the river both sides then, and nobody used to fish it, and you had it all to yourself. And it is a beautiful place, and it's calming, relaxing, lovely. Creating a wetland habitat for that people can access for the public has got to be good. Because we're fortunate here, we've got an area of outstanding natural beauty, Cannock Chase, and that side of the river is more heathland and what have you, whereas you go the other side, and as you go farther down, obviously it's quarried a lot for the aggregate, and Rugeley seems to be in the middle, where we've got the beauty of that and then the diversity of that. And for more people to access it, it's got to be beneficial to everybody.
Thanks for listening and everyone who helped us.